The air in the bedroom felt thick with unspoken resentments. It was the 3rd year of my marriage to Zephyr Sterling, a marriage built on convenience, not love. A marriage of convenience that was rapidly becoming inconvenient. And now, the woman who had once dumped him for greener pastures, his so-called true love, had resurfaced. She even had the audacity to send me pictures, evidence of their rekindled affair, their hotel rendezvous. Strangely, a wave of relief washed over me. 3 years of sharing a bed with Zephyr, 3 years of pretending, had chipped away at the pedestal I'd once placed him on. The unattainable, untouchable object of my youthful affection was now. Well, he was attainable. And as the saying goes, a man in hand is worth less than the dirt beneath your feet. No offense to dirt, of course. My phone buzzed, shattering the quiet contemplation of my messy life. It was a message from him, from Zephyr, the aloof, beautiful man I'd somehow managed to marry. My heart, that traitorous organ, gave a little flutter. "What are you doing?" he texted. I replied, with a boldness fueled by cheap alcohol and despair, "Thinking of you." Silence. An agonizing, digital silence. Just as I was bracing myself for another awkward, cold exchange, he fired back. "At home." A check-in? This was a first. Years of marriage, and now he decides to play the attentive husband. I didn't dare ignore him. "Yes, darling. I even ironed your shirts for you." I added a cutesy cat emoji, begging for approval, for some sign of affection. "I see you. Nice moves. Come have a drink." My head snapped up. I scanned the dimly lit, pulsing chaos of the bar, my eyes searching. And there he was, bathed in the shifting, colored lights, a faint smirk playing on his lips. Zephyr, my husband, raised his glass in a mocking toast. Zephyr Sterling. He was the quintessential protagonist of a campus romance novel, devastatingly handsome, academically brilliant, and, tragically, poor. And I, like the predictable, villainous second female lead in every one of those stories, was the fool with more money than sense. Emphasis on the money. So, it wasn't exactly a mystery why Zephyr, after being so cruelly discarded by his first love, had deigned to settle for the consolation prize, me, his devoted, pathetic admirer. I caught a glimpse of my reflection, dark circles under my eyes, a testament to sleepless nights and a crumbling marriage. I glanced back at my phone at the taunting message from Zephyr's ex-girlfriend. "You can't possibly sleep soundly, knowing he's not truly yours, can you?" I wanted to reply, "Actually, I sleep just fine. Zephyr is a surprisingly quiet sleeper. No snoring." But the injustice of it all choked me. There he was, peacefully asleep in our bed, while I was tormented by the constant, gnawing fear of losing him. Years. I'd forgotten how many years I'd endured this. "Zephyr, I want a divorce," I whispered, the words surprising even myself. Zephyr, his arm draped over his eyes, let out a soft Then, as if the words finally registered, he sat up, his usually clear eyes darkening. "Nix Everly, what did you just say?" In a flash, the carefully constructed facade of the devoted wife was back in place. "I was asking if you want to eat or have eggs." "What kind of eggs? Fried or boiled?" Years of being the nice girl and a doormat had made my tongue stiff, unable to form the words of defiance I truly felt. Later that night, his phone lit up. He quietly got out of bed, taking his phone to the bathroom. I opened my eyes, sighing. There was really no need for such secrecy. I'd learned, in these few years of living with Zephyr, that he simply didn't love me. He could give me everything I wanted: respect, tolerance, a facade of a perfect marriage, even the prospect of children. Everything, except genuine, passionate love. My phone buzzed again. Another message from her. "Your husband is chatting with me." So, should I send her a thank you card? A medal? I fought back the tears, the burning in my nose and eyes. Finally, I switched off my phone and burrowed deeper under the covers. Sometime later, half asleep, I felt a soft touch on my forehead, a fleeting, gentle press. Divorce was probably out of the question, at least for now. And pleasing my mother-in-law, Zephyr Sterling, was still necessary. I arrived at the assisted living facility with a thermos of soup, only to be turned away. The nurse informed me that Zephyr was napping. I glanced at my watch. 9 in the morning. Excellent. Even Zephyr's mother found ways to make my life difficult. I stretched my stiff legs, realizing that standing outside in the cold wind was preferable to sitting inside, listening to Zephyr drone on about Zephyr's ex-girlfriend. In Vesper's eyes, I would never measure up to the woman she'd practically raised. Ms. Everly? A voice startled me. I looked around. The assisted living facility was usually deserted at this hour. And then, as if he'd materialized from thin air, a young man appeared, leaves falling around him like confetti. He'd been sitting in a tree. "Don't you remember me?" he asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Your student, Kaylin Shadowwood." The name didn't ring a bell, but the face, that undeniably handsome, innocently charming face. I remembered. Back when I was still teaching a graduating class, Kaylin's popularity with the girls had been a constant headache. He was also brilliant, and his father was the vice principal of the school. A complicated student, to say the least. But, thankfully, he'd never caused any major trouble during my tenure. A bit mischievous, yes, but a good kid at heart. "What a coincidence," I said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" He pointed upwards, lowering his voice. "My mother is a resident here." I noticed then that the room next to Vesper's, which had always been empty, was now occupied. I was trying to figure out how to offer my condolences when I saw it, a deep gash on his neck, blood staining his white collar. Before I could call for help, Kaylin stepped closer. He was tall, forcing me to tilt my head back to look at him. "Sho," he said, a smile still playing on his lips. "Miss Everly, I don't want my mother to see." I drove him to the nearest hospital. He was still just a boy, despite his age. He kept insisting he was fine, oblivious to the concerned glances from passers-by. "Okay, please stop talking. Just get inside," I urged. Kaylin's brow furrowed slightly. "I've graduated from university, Miss Everly. Could you please stop talking to me like I'm a child?" I laughed, then quickly apologized. "Sorry." He smiled, but the smile quickly faded, leaving only the bright, innocent glint in his eyes. I found myself unable to meet his gaze, looking down instead. Sitting on a bench outside, waiting for him to be treated, I stared at the shoes passing by. Soon, I recognized a familiar pair. Zephyr had never cared much about fashion, so he probably didn't even realize how his shirts were always perfectly pressed and clean, or how his custom-made shoes fit him so comfortably. Just like he never seemed to care how much it bothered me to see her by his side. Zephyr clearly hadn't expected to see me there. He paused for a moment, visibly surprised. But Zephyr was Zephyr. Even with his old flame and his current wife in such close proximity, he quickly regained his composure. Perhaps the question of who was the current flame was still up for debate. "Nix, what are you doing here? Are you unwell?" Lyra, the ex, her face pale, her wrist still bleeding, was the one who expressed concern for me. I stared at Zephyr's hand, resting protectively on her arm. "You told me you had an early meeting at the company today," I said, my voice flat. Zephyr didn't deny it. "Something came up. I had to bring Lyra to the hospital." "Nix, Lyra began. "Listen, Zephyr," I interrupted, my voice rising. "I need you to come with me to the assisted living facility now. I can't handle your mother alone. Right now. This instant." Lyra's eyes welled up with tears, and she leaned closer to Zephyr, her voice a masterpiece of manipulative sweetness. "Zephyr, you should go. I'm at the hospital now. I'll be fine." Zephyr frowned, as if he was struggling to tolerate my unreasonable behavior. "Nix, I'm just bringing Lyra." Lyra. I exploded, my voice cracking. "Does she not have a last name? Is she an orphan? Are you the only one who can bring her to the hospital? Who do you think you are? Her savior?" "Miss, this is a hospital. Please keep your voice down." Several nurses rushed over, trying to pull me away. People were staring, pointing, some even pulling out their phones to record the scene. Zephyr simply looked at me, his gaze cold and emotionless. He then turned and led Lyra away to see a doctor. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. Kaylin had emerged, his wound still unbandaged. He gently took me from the nurses, as if I were a fragile, precious object. The nurses shook their heads disapprovingly. "Miss, even if there are issues, you can discuss them outside the hospital. Please don't cause a scene." Kaylin, his hand gently patting my back, stiffened slightly. He apologized to the nurses on my behalf, then, with a combination of charm and firmness, persuaded them to delete the videos. He was handsome, and his words were sweet. He quickly won over the nurses, leaving them beaming. I stared at my feet, feeling utterly defeated. It seemed that people who were both handsome and intelligent were always so likable. Just like Zephyr and Lyra. I'm sorry, I said, holding a cup of steaming tea. I shouldn't have lost control like that. I embarrassed you. Kalen sat beside me, trying his best to sound casual. Miss Everly, it's payback. I can't even count how many times I embarrassed you back in school. I shook my head. It's not the same. I don't even know why. Why what? I don't know why, I said, my voice trembling. Whenever I'm around that woman, I completely lose control. Her name was Lyra Fairchild, and she was my college classmate and Zephyr's childhood sweetheart. Before I met Zephyr, we were friends. She was lively and outgoing, the undisputed campus queen. But only I knew what Lyra Fairchild was truly like. My parents had died when I was young, leaving me in the care of other relatives. My grandfather had wisely established a trust fund for me, ensuring my financial security. You think about it. How could an orphan with no parents have so much money? She's definitely being kept. She's not even that pretty. I bet she's good at other things. Yeah, didn't someone see her getting into a bald, old guy's Kian? The vague yet pointed attacks were relentless. I never imagined such absurd rumors would spread so widely. They ruined my life. I was constantly met with glares and whispers. Even the usually indifferent counselor warned me to behave myself. They were all wary of me. I was a source of contagion, a gold digger, a pitiful, misguided, and hated creature. I couldn't defend myself, and I didn't know where to start. I had no parents to back me up. My desperate explanations only sounded like pathetic excuses. I became a solitary island, separated from joy by an invisible, impenetrable wall. I pounded on that wall, only to be met with scorn and disdain. But I still had one friend. Her name was Lyra. She knew I wasn't the mistress of some bald, old man. She was the only one who knew my family actually had some money. She was good at comforting people. She would cover me with a blanket when I fell asleep. In fact, until another friend of mine, from a different school, uncovered the source of the rumors, I was incredibly grateful to Lyra. I even started calling her sister. Unfortunately, the person spreading the rumors was none other than Lyra herself. Her exposure didn't bring the punishment she deserved. Instead, more people came to blame me. Why didn't you just explain yourself? I don't think it's entirely Lyra's fault. Nyx was probably showing off. If I were her, I'd also wonder where all that money came from. No wonder she's so arrogant. She's a rich girl. Only Lyra is kind enough to befriend her. I learned then that being right didn't always mean being in the right. Kalen's face darkened, but he still spoke softly, comforting me. It's all in the past. Don't think about it anymore. I sniffled, my smile more painful than tears. Yes, it's in the past. But after all these years, seeing her still makes me so uncomfortable. Kalen lowered his eyes carefully. Does your husband know about all this? Of course he knows, I said, a hint of sarcasm creeping into my voice. They weren't broken up yet back then. My feelings for Zephyr were also because of Lyra. That woman was destined to do me wrong. It was the day of the election for the head of the arts department. I had just won first prize in both the city ballet and violin competitions. I admit I was being deliberate. I didn't want her to be happy. I wanted to compete with her in everything, even if I couldn't win. I just wanted to make her uncomfortable. Lyra was smart, but her family wasn't well off. She couldn't afford good teachers, and she had very few awards to her name. But school competitions weren't about talent, they were about connections. As expected, even though her face turned green with envy, she was still leading the vote, on the verge of winning. Then, the dark-haired boy who had been sitting in the back, watching the vote count, suddenly stood up. He leaned down, tapped on the table of the vote counter, and asked for a blank ballot. He glanced at me, then slowly, deliberately wrote a name. My face, which had been flushed with embarrassment from the lack of votes, slowly returned to normal. I knew he was Lyra's boyfriend. I also knew he was the vice president of the student council. If he voted for me, I would definitely win. And I did. I overturned the results in the final moments, narrowly defeating Lyra. Lyra ran out crying. Much later, after I had finally, miraculously, become Zephyr's partner, I asked him why he had chosen me. He said simply, because it was fair. Such beautiful words. But why, now, couldn't he be fair to me? We were silent on the way back to the assisted living facility. Just as we were about to part, Kalen suddenly said, "Miss Everly, I think you're prettier than that woman." I was stunned, then a little amused. If you're trying to make me feel better, just say so. You shouldn't lie, you know. He looked at me, his expression serious, making my heart beat a little faster. A handsome man is a handsome man. Staring into a handsome man's eyes is a true test of willpower. I'm serious. He handed me the thermos I'd brought for Vesper, then rolled up his sleeve, making a chopping motion with his hand. See, her wound is like this, deepening downwards at a 3 o'clock angle. It's impossible to get that kind of injury under normal circumstances. You only glanced at it, I exclaimed. Kalen lowered his sleeve, sighing. Are you focusing on the wrong thing? So the point is, she did it on purpose? When I entered Vesper's room, I was immediately met with sarcasm. Giving up already? Vesper scoffed. You said you'd bring me soup every day, rain or shine. Where's the soup? I almost laughed. You never drink it anyway. Why waste it? She opened her eyes, glancing at me with increasing impatience. Why don't you look at yourself? Lyra would have. Ed, not wanting to argue. I'm leaving. But then I paused, leaning against the doorframe, looking back at her. If your son had married Lyra, what do you think the chances are that you'd be living in such a nice assisted living facility? I met Kalen in the hallway. He was holding the empty thermos, a bright smile on his face. Your cooking skills have improved a lot. I was momentarily captivated by his pure, innocent smile, forgetting what improved actually meant. I chuckled, resisting the urge to stand on my toes and ruffle his hair. I exchanged numbers with him, promising to bring him soup again tomorrow. Kalen shook his head, a hint of shyness in his voice. No, please don't. Making soup takes a lot of time. You should sleep in. I hear, girls like you love to sleep in, right? I was slightly taken aback, thinking, he's so considerate. No wonder he's so popular with the girls. The next day, I turned off my alarm and slept until 10. Zephyr was the one who woke me, sitting on the edge of my bed. He leaned in, trying to talk to me. I pulled my arm away, turning my back to him coldly. Still angry. He paused, then spoke in a low voice. The situation was urgent. I didn't have time to ask you. Why were you at the hospital? I stared into his eyes, speaking slowly and deliberately. I'm pregnant. Really? When? He jumped up, his face a mixture of surprise and concern. He even reached out to touch my forehead. I dodged his touch, continuing to stare at him, watching as all the emotion drained from his face, until he became as expressionless as I was. I forced a smile. It's a lie. I was lying. So let's get a divorce, I added. Nix, you can't treat marriage like a game, he said, after a long, uncomfortable silence. His words were bland, meaningless. Isn't that what you've already done? I laughed. She left, and you just grabbed anyone to marry. She came back, and you rushed back to her, offering your comfort and care. Don't you have any self-respect? It's just a divorce. I want to see if Lyra Fairchild will still want you after you're left with nothing. Nix Everly. Zephyr's eyes flashed with anger, as if I'd struck a nerve. What are you saying? Are you saying that without your family's money, I'm nothing? I bit my lip, saying nothing. Of course not. The Everly family had some money, but Zephyr had been constantly expanding his business empire over the years. The Everly family of today was vastly different from the Everly family of the past. I also knew that he'd worked incredibly hard to get where he was. He would never agree to leave with nothing. But I really, really wanted to know if the woman who had dumped Zephyr for a chance to study abroad would dump him again, for money, a second time. Zephyr and I were in a cold war. He seemed to think I was just being irrational, deciding to simply ignore me for the time being. Of course. Once a doormat, always a doormat. Who could have imagined that the man I'd silently loved for so many years, the man I'd finally managed to marry, would be so easily discarded, simply because that woman had returned? It was that easy, because that woman was Lyra Fairchild, and because he'd vowed, when we married, to try to forget her. If this was his idea of trying, then I didn't need to continue to torture myself. The 3-year itch. What a joke. Was he the only one feeling the itch? After another late-night text message, working late, don't wait up, I didn't prepare a delicious meal. I didn't sleep on the sofa, waiting foolishly. I put on the tight, strappy dress I'd only worn before our marriage. I studied my reflection. I wasn't beautiful, but I wasn't ugly either. I'd maintained my figure during my years as a housewife, and with the rich wife bonus, I didn't believe it. I didn't believe that only Zephyr could have it both ways, juggling two women. I deliberately avoided the bar where I'd gotten drunk before, choosing a quieter place with fewer people. I sipped my drink slowly. The first man appeared sooner than I'd expected. I turned slightly, studying him. His skin wasn't as fair as his. His nose wasn't as straight. Even his aura was miles behind. Driven by the need to not lose, I sat there for 3 hours, and not a single decent prospect appeared. I sighed deeply. It seemed that money alone wasn't enough. You needed to have good qualities yourself. A sense of helpless frustration washed over me. I'd forgotten that there was still a man sitting across from me, a man I'd picked up. The man, seeing that I hadn't spoken for a long time, assumed I was drunk. He reached out, attempting to put his arm around my bare shoulder. I subtly moved away. I should go home. Otherwise, my husband will come looking for me. You have a husband? The man stared at me in astonishment. I was too lazy to explain. I grabbed my purse, preparing to leave. But the man grabbed my purse strap, clearly drunk and acting out. I was about to curse when I saw a Bugatti speeding past the bar. It was Zephyr's car. I didn't have time to argue. I yanked my purse free and ran outside. I was too late. I watched as the car disappeared into the night. At the same time, my phone vibrated twice. Going to a hotel with Zephyr now. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. My teeth started chattering. In that moment, I felt so cold, a coldness that spread from my back to my heart, obliterating what little rationality I had left. Let it all be destroyed. Let it all end. I turned back, catching a glimpse of my eyes in the mirrored wall of the bar. They were filled with a dark, ominous flame. I walked up to the drunk man, grabbed his whiskey, and drank it in one gulp, staring at him defiantly. He slowly looked up at me, his eyebrows relaxed, his eyes clear and bright behind his glasses. It wasn't the same man. Damn it. Seeing his slightly furrowed brow, his apparent displeasure, I took a step back, embarrassed. Ms. Everly. A familiar voice echoed in my ears. I turned around, slightly dizzy. The man caught my arm, supporting me. It was Kalen Shadowwood, whom I hadn't seen in days. He exchanged a brief greeting with the other man, then helped me outside. Is that your brother? I was starting to feel the effects of the alcohol. I didn't know Vice Principal Shadowwood had such a grown-up son. Yeah, Kalen said, sounding reluctant to discuss it. His brow was still furrowed. What's wrong? My mind was slow. You. Why are you here? Me? He said quietly, this is my bar. I should be asking you, Ms. Everly, why you're here, and wearing such a cool outfit. He glanced at me, then took off his jacket and draped it over my shoulders. He hesitated for a moment, then added, such a revealing outfit. I don't know what to do, I mumbled. I really don't know what to do. I was so angry just now. The anger and desire for revenge that had consumed me after seeing that text message had vanished. Now, all I felt was a profound sadness. I'd been so foolish, wanting to use my own body to get back at Zephyr. How could I have been so stupid? The cold night air brought a wave of fear. Thankfully, I hadn't gone through with it. Miss Everly, he said, looking at me. His already fair skin seemed even more flawless under the orange streetlight. If you want to get back at him, there's no need to hurt yourself. I stared at him, dumbfounded. Kalen looked into the distance, avoiding my gaze. Ultimately, isn't your pain caused by the fact that you and they are different? You have boundaries. They don't. Those words, they sounded so familiar. He knew what I'd been planning to do. He knew. The shame of being seen through made my face burn. I believe you can get through this on your own. You don't need to rely on anyone else, right? He asked, his voice sincere. It was like he was coaxing a cat that had climbed onto a rooftop. Come here. That's right. A little closer. Good. Thank you, I said. Really, thank you. My nose tingled. It had been years. I couldn't remember how many. Since my mother had died, no one had been so patient, so almost indulgent, in their advice when I'd made a mistake. Zephyr would have just said, coldly, why are you so stupid? I'll take you home, Kalen finally said, turning to me. His slightly long bangs covered his eyebrows. His eyes were round, with a slight upward tilt, giving him an air of innocent charm. If you want to take a beautiful lady home, please allow me the honor. I finally managed a small laugh. I woke up as dawn was breaking. Kalen Shadowwood was propped up on his hand, his eyes closed. We were still in the car. I stretched, and the movement woke him. His eyes were tinged with red, and his voice was low. "Sister, you're finally awake." My heart gave a sudden, uncomfortable jump. I managed an awkward, "Yeah." I'm usually a very heavy sleeper, especially after drinking so much the night before. I figured he must have driven me home, but couldn't wake me up, and ended up spending the night in the car. When I got home, Zephyr Sterling was already there. He watched in silence as I, draped in a man's jacket, sauntered past him. "Where were you?" I kicked off my heels and glanced at him in the mirror. "Strange. Is that any of your business?" Zephyr's face darkened immediately. "Out all night, reeking of alcohol, you." "Your little sweetheart already texted me," I said, wiping off my lipstick with my bare hand. I turned and looked pointedly at his lower body. "You're just a lot quicker than my friend. So you got back before me." "Impressive." Zephyr's eyes blazed with fury. He grabbed my wrist, dragged me to his car, and without a word, slammed the accelerator. No matter how much I struggled, it was useless. His lips were pressed tightly together, his profile etched with anger. I gave up and closed my eyes. The assisted living facility. Of course. Lyra Fairchild was kneeling on the floor, washing Vesper Sterling's feet, a picture of domestic bliss. Vesper's face wore a genuine smile, one I'd never seen directed at me. "Your mother had an episode last night. The nurse tried calling you, but you didn't answer." "Luckily, Lyra came to visit," Zephyr said, his voice heavy. "I was indeed working overtime yesterday. She's not my sweetheart, and I didn't spend the night with her. Shouldn't you be thanking her?" "Forget it," Vesper said, scrutinizing my attire with disdain. "I don't deserve such a daughter-in-law." A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. I almost choked on the bitter laugh that rose in my throat. "You really like Lyra that much, huh, old lady?" Lyra kept her head bowed, silent. I suddenly understood. Even if I showed them the text messages, she could easily claim that the number wasn't hers, that I was framing her. She was so clever. "So, do you know why Lyra dumped Zephyr?" "Nix Everly." "Nix." I shouted, my voice sharp and commanding. "Shut up. Both of you." I stared at Vesper, pointing at Lyra. "This precious goddaughter of yours, for a fully funded study abroad opportunity, she didn't hesitate to seduce." Zephyr clamped his hand over my mouth. I hadn't slept all night, and I was so exhausted I felt like I could faint at any moment. And it was only then, in that instant, that I finally woke up. I finally understood how much Lyra meant to him. He'd rather his mother continue to believe I was the other woman, rather be mocked and scorned for being cheated on, than allow anyone to say a single negative word about Lyra. The day she left, I found him in a bar, drunk and heartbroken. He said, "I don't hate her. I just miss the innocent, naive girl she used to be." A year after she left, he finally decided to pull himself together. I stayed up with him night after night, helping him revise his thesis, my eyes swollen like light bulbs from exhaustion. Finally, he said, "Nix, let's give this a try." 2.5 years after she left, his mother was hospitalized with a sudden illness. I frantically contacted everyone I knew, searching for a doctor. The day we found out it was benign, we were both relieved. He said, his eyes red, "Nix, I think I'm starting to like you." Shortly after our engagement, I found an old photo of them in his book. He said, "I'm sorry, Nix. I think she'll always have a place in my heart, but I'll try. Will you believe me?" The day the lawyer came to discuss the divorce, he said, "Nix, you're really overthinking this. We're really just friends now." When I first met Lyra, I could never have imagined that this person would become a shadow that completely overshadowed my life. Zephyr's eyes were filled with disappointment. "Nix, you know my mother is in poor health. Lyra is like a daughter to her. She can't handle hearing those things you were saying. And you promised me you wouldn't tell her, didn't you?" "Yes," I said, a cold smile playing on my lips. I changed my mind. "Is that a problem?" After leaving the law firm, I wandered aimlessly. Zephyr's voice still echoed in my ears. "I'm not blaming you, Nix. Since we got married, I definitely wanted things to work out between us. I'm sorry. I think we should take some time apart. I'll read the divorce agreement carefully. If it really comes to that. I hope it never does. If it really came to that, what could he do?" I walked past a coffee shop and, through the glass, I saw a familiar profile. It was an incredibly handsome and refined face, one that was impossible to forget. It was him, Kaylin's brother. Remembering the awkwardness of our last encounter, I quickly turned my head and walked on, head down, but it was too late. Nix? A somewhat familiar voice abruptly stopped me in my tracks. I stiffly turned around. Lyra and Kaylin's brother were standing side by side, a truly stunning couple. I wanted to turn and run, but I didn't. I'd already been rude enough at the bar. "Let me introduce you. This is my boss, Killian Sterling," Lyra said. Then she turned to him, her face lit up with the kind of bright smile I knew so well. "This is my college classmate, her name is." "It's okay." "Nice to meet you," Killian interrupted, extending his hand to me slowly and deliberately. Did he not remember me? I hesitantly extended my hand. "I'm Killian Sterling," he said, gently squeezing my hand. The gesture was strangely intimate, yet so fleeting that I wondered if it had even happened. He smiled faintly, quickly withdrawing his hand. I didn't bother to overthink it. I turned and walked away. I agreed to Zephyr's request for a 1-month cooling-off period, but secretly, I'd already enlisted Kaylin's help to investigate our finances and bank statements. I wasn't Zephyr. I had limited capabilities. A divorce might not leave me as well off as I was now, so I needed to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I was prepared for the worst. If there was any evidence of asset transfers or unfair distribution, I would present all the evidence of their continued entanglement, take it to court, and use every means possible to ensure Zephyr was left with nothing. Kaylin was right. Once money was involved, even the most naive, love-struck person had to force themselves to be rational. I drove to the assisted living facility. It was time for my scheduled meeting with Kaylin. He was wearing a dark gray tracksuit, as if he'd just finished playing sports. His temples were still damp. He nodded slightly, then introduced me to an older man beside him, the director of the facility. "Sister, you're so silly," he said, shaking his head quietly after the director left. I knew he was talking about the fact that I'd been paying for Vesper's expensive care even before we got married. But all I could think about was, when did he start calling me sister? I had no idea Kaylin was such a good golfer. In my mind, he was still the little boy who drew funny faces on his homework and faked illness to skip gym class. "Kaylin," I asked him during a break, "why are you helping me?" He lowered his eyes as if he'd been thinking about it for a long time, then said slowly, "Do you know how to make someone's unrequited love completely end?" "Probably by knowing that the person they love is already in love with someone else," I said calmly. Unfortunately, when I first met Zephyr, he'd already been in love with Lyra for years. "No," he said, shaking his head slowly, his eyes gleaming, weary yet cool. "It's by eating their wedding candy and having to say, 'This candy is really sweet.'" His gaze was so sincere and direct that my heart started racing. I quickly looked away. "I didn't know you had such a painful past," I stammered, finally managing to utter this useless sentence. Kaylin chuckled softly, rubbing his golf club, neither confirming nor denying. The 1-month period passed quickly. The investigation showed no irregularities in the company's finances. I was relieved. Now, I could focus on the divorce proceedings. Zephyr clearly still didn't realize my determination. On the day I returned home, he even cooked sweet and sour pork ribs for me. I poked at the ribs in my bowl with my chopsticks, then looked up, meeting his hesitant gaze. It seemed like he had a lot to say, but he remained reserved and calm. It was the Zephyr I knew, cold as ice, a Zephyr who could never be warmed. I put down my chopsticks. "Have you been in contact with her? Or has she asked you to help her find a place to live, a job, or take her to the hospital?" The hope in Zephyr's eyes instantly dimmed. "Nix, you don't need to look at me like that. Even if I did help her, it was purely out of kindness. She's not." "So that's a no?" Seeing his seemingly default expression, I clapped my hands and laughed. "That's right. She's hooked to bigger fish now. She won't be bothering you anymore. Can we not talk about her?" I stood up, placing the divorce papers from my bag on the table. As I was about to leave, I suddenly remembered something. "Zephyr, I never liked sweet and sour pork ribs. The person who liked them was Lyra. Lyra Fairchild was truly a lingering ghost." The shop assistant looked at us both, clearly uncomfortable. There were no other customers around, so Lyra didn't bother to pretend to be friendly. She said, pointedly, "I'm sure Ms. Everly doesn't feel like buying such a red bag right now." The emphasis on Ms. Everly. She knew I was getting a divorce. Strangely, I didn't feel any pain. I looked at Lyra, who was completely transformed, decked out in new clothes and accessories. I was actually wondering if Killian Sterling was really the type of man who would willingly pay for a woman like Lyra. Lyra, seeing that I didn't react, simply told the shop assistant to wrap up the bag and walked away. Kalen didn't answer my question. He just smiled and said, "Teacher, just wait and see." He hadn't called me teacher in a long time. I was actually starting to feel uncomfortable with it. Not long after, something big happened at Killian's company. At the end of the month, when the accounts were being reconciled, 6 figures were missing from the working capital. Killian calmly instructed his employees to call the police. And then, Lyra, who had been enjoying the high life at the company for a whole month, was arrested. I heard that when she was arrested, she was crying so hard her makeup was ruined. She kept screaming Killian's name, calling him a scumbag, accusing him of setting her up and sleeping with her for free. When Killian told me this, he frowned slightly, which, combined with his beautiful face, made him look rather pitiful. "Miss Everly, I've really sacrificed a lot for you. My reputation has been ruined by that woman." I listened to the whole story, my eyes wide with disbelief. Is this what they call entrapment? Killian chuckled softly. Who told her to be so stupid? She wrote her pin on the back of the card and dared to use it. She probably thought she was my girlfriend for so long that she lost her mind, couldn't tell the difference between real and fake. My things can't be obtained just with a pretty face. She's used to taking shortcuts, I said, stirring my tea indifferently. Killian tapped on the table. I came to see you today for a reason. I'm just telling you, my services don't come cheap. Even for my brother, I won't give a discount. I looked up at him. How much? You're hopeless, he said, standing up and glancing at me with exasperation. He muttered to himself, I really don't understand what he sees in you. It wasn't until he'd walked a considerable distance away that I finally snapped out of it. He meant that all of this was Kalen's doing? What's this? Kalen glanced at the card on the table, then continued reading his book. Compensation, I said, trying to sound casual. Teacher can't let you lose out. If it's not enough, I'll add more. Teacher, he said, looking at me meaningfully, there are some things I can't say right now. When you're completely over it, come find me here. I'll be waiting, always. Over it? Yes, over it. I practically fled that day. His gaze was too intense, too intimate. The day of the divorce, Zephyr admitted that he would cover Lyra's embezzlement to try to get her a lighter sentence. I nodded and signed the papers without surprise. It's your money. You can do whatever you want with it. Zephyr hesitated, his eyes flickering. I stood up and stared at him for a moment. Looking at you closely, you're really quite ordinary. What? Zephyr looked at me, stunned. It's probably the love I gave you that made you seem special, I said to myself. I heard your mother was so upset when she found out about Lyra going to jail that she was hospitalized, I said, giving him one last look of pity. Remember to pay the assisted living facility bill. It's been 5 years. All the past empty joys were real, and they were all in the past. I don't believe that divorce, breaking up, or denying the past can start a new life. These things are just putting my already beautiful life back on track. The day I decided to let go, it was as if I was finally bathed in the long-awaited bright sunshine. Killian called me, saying he'd seen Zephyr and his mother at the hospital. His mother looked very unwell, as if she was seriously ill. His tone was quite gloating. I hummed, she probably won't die. The old lady is tough. Hey, when Zephyr was paying the bill, I went to the old lady's room and eavesdropped. Guess what? The old lady was telling someone that she had a hard life. Back then, she was a widow with a young child and couldn't afford to send Zephyr to school, so she took out a high-interest loan. She couldn't pay it back and was almost beaten to death. Guess whose family paid it off? I didn't guess. I just said softly, Killian, you should visit your mother more often. Assisted living facilities are pretty boring. In the 6 years I'd known Zephyr, the things he didn't want me to know, I didn't know before, and I didn't want to know now. What? Killian mumbled on the other end. His mother is his mother. My mother is my mother. Later, Kalen and I went on a trip together to relax. On a windy beach, I tentatively asked him about his mother. To my surprise, he told me everything very frankly. His mother had been the other woman in his father's marriage, and he didn't find out about it until his senior year of high school. Aside from the shock to his worldview, just hearing his mother say, if it weren't for you, we would have split up long ago. I wouldn't have to be the hated other woman, was enough to plunge him into complete self-doubt. I never realized. I said to him, feeling guilty, trying to comfort him. Your mother is disgusting, he said, his face calm, but his words shocking. A large part of my hatred for the world is because of adults like her, who only care about their own pleasure, completely ignoring responsibility, morality, and ethics. They trampled on love, and they trampled on marriage. I looked at him anxiously. The night wind ruffled his hair, but his eyes remained calm and peaceful. Don't hate the world. I don't hate it anymore, he said, smiling shyly, a small dimple appearing on his cheek. I was stunned. Miss Everly, he said, lowering his head slightly to look at me. Will you consider letting me pursue you? I took a step back, and his eyes immediately dimmed. But a moment later, his eyes lit up with a smile again. Teacher, I'm just kidding. I couldn't tell if I was happy or sad. I made an excuse and fled. I tossed and turned, my mind in turmoil. Zephyr had occupied my entire youth, all my emotions. I'd even tried to find the missing parental love in him. Lyra had once called me a love-deprived, people-pleaser. I always knew I was such an annoying person. Did I really not know that there was something more than just a teacher-student relationship in the way Kaylin looked at me? I think I was aware of it, but I forced myself not to think about it, hoping, selfishly, that there would be one more person who was kind to me. But I forgot how unfair that was to him. I packed my things overnight and rushed back home, leaving a letter. Before I could respond, I needed to clear my head. No matter what, I couldn't repeat the same mistakes. I arrived home at 11 at night. The moment the lights came on, I realized something was wrong. The air was thick with the smell of alcohol and tobacco. I picked up a vase and walked slowly towards the bedroom. Actually, I had a pretty good idea who it was. This was the first house Zephyr bought with his first earnings, a small house, perfect for a timid person like me to live alone. Zephyr had left it to me. It was full of our memories. I hadn't had time to take back the other key. Nix, Zephyr said, his back to me, his voice surprisingly steady, though a slight tremor might be detectable if one listened carefully. He said, you burned our wedding photo. I paused for a moment, then shrugged indifferently. Do you expect me to sleep facing your face? Sorry, I can't do that. Zephyr fell silent, not speaking for a long time, so long that I lost patience and turned to leave, planning to find somewhere else to stay. How could you so quickly? You really did, so quickly. I stopped. But he choked up, unable to finish the sentence. For the first time, I heard his voice tremble like that, such a questioning and aggrieved tone. My eyes felt a little warm, not because of his words, but because I remembered. I remembered all those nights I'd waited for Zephyr to come home, all those mornings I'd woken up early to iron his shirts. How was it quick? All your indifference, your coldness, your carelessness, I endured it for 6 years. Never again, never again. I didn't soften. I didn't turn back. I closed the door. Zephyr's perspective. The door closed. She was leaving. In that moment, all the suppressed thoughts in Zephyr's mind suddenly surfaced. He stood up abruptly, staggering towards the door. He'd drunk too much. His world was spinning. He closed his eyes, leaning against the wall. When he opened them, he saw the living room decor, the sky blue wallpaper. Zephyr, what color do you like? That year, when they got married, Nix, who was usually so carefree, had volunteered to decorate their new home. What had he said? He'd forgotten. It definitely wasn't, whatever you like, or just do what you think is best. He had apparently always been impatient with Nix. The first time he saw Nix, she was standing stubbornly on the stage. Even though not a single vote had been cast for her, she still held her back straight. Every time the votes were announced, there would be snickers from the audience. She bit her lip, her face red as a tomato. He gave her his vote because of his principles. Nix smiled at him faintly, tears in her eyes. It was strange. Someone had voted for her, and she was about to cry. Lyra ran out crying. He didn't feel like comforting her. His mind was occupied by those bright eyes, fighting back tears, a strange, peculiar beauty. His mother called, urging him to send money home. Lyra wiped her tears and smiled again. Zephyr, let me ask my mom to give it to Auntie. It'll be easier. Zephyr said without hesitation, no need. No need. The Zhou family already owed the Fairchild family enough. The two families were neighbors. Zephyr's father and Lyra's father were also colleagues. Zephyr's father died in the line of duty when Zephyr was only 6 years old. Zephyr's mother was beautiful, but she wasn't good at managing money. She quickly squandered everything Zephyr's father had left behind. Zephyr, like a little beggar, followed his mother, the big beggar, borrowing money everywhere, enduring glares and bullying. When they borrowed money, Zephyr's mother would gamble, would spend. After school, he would be locked out of the house, wandering the world like a ghost. Thankfully, there was still Lyra's father. Zephyr lived with the Fairchilds for many years. Lyra's father didn't have a son, so he treated him like one, almost like a second father. Already not well off, he single-handedly shouldered the future of 2 children. He and Lyra grew closer. In fact, the 2 families had already had the intention of becoming in-laws. Perhaps he had liked Lyra if he had known what like meant. Lyra had only been abroad for a few months, and he was already starting to forget what she'd said to him before she left. He only remembered her saying that she wasn't willing to live an ordinary life, that she wasn't willing to marry a man as withdrawn and cold-blooded as him. He didn't blame her. He was so afraid of losing that he never dared to give easily. He met Nyx again. This time, her smile was no longer restrained, but generous, unrestrained. She pestered him all day. It was a little annoying, but sometimes, when she fell asleep beside him after chattering, she was actually quite cute. Sometime later, they started dating. He was naturally cold towards everyone, even his mother. Nyx was often driven to tears by his bluntness and coldness. He often saw her wiping away tears alone, but he just watched silently. Liking him was a difficult thing to persist in and absolutely not worth it. He didn't believe anyone could do it. The night before their engagement, she held their photo, sobbing uncontrollably. Zephyr deliberately told her, "She will always have a place in my heart." What he really wanted to say was, "Please leave quickly." Everything about his past, about Lyra, he kept to himself. He'd already learned how to bury his pain without a trace. He clumsily pushed her away. He wanted her to leave, to prove that he wasn't worth loving. He braced himself against the wall, opening the door. Nyx was standing by the roadside, hailing a taxi, tears still glistening under her eyes. Zephyr wanted to run after her, but in the next moment, someone embraced his girl tightly, wiping away her tears. "Kaylin Shadowwood," she said, looking up at him, her voice full of grievance. "I." The man named Kaylin leaned down and gently kissed her. Zephyr slowly stopped. He was the coward.